Welcome to Learning English with Poetry. I'm your teacher, Adam Novice. Today, we are studying a poem by one of the most famous poets of the English language, perhaps one of the most famous writers of the English language, William Shakespeare. Shakespeare was born in 1654 in England. He wrote poems, but he also wrote plays. He is perhaps more famous for his plays, such as Romeo and Juliet, Hamlet, Macbeth, and King Lear. Shakespeare not only used the English language, but he also added to it. Because of Shakespeare, we have words like bedazzled, cold-blooded, eyeball, swagger, and multitudinous. If you do not understand those words, that is okay. Just know that English is a language that is always changing, and Shakespeare used the language's flexibility in his writing. A sonnet is a poem that has particular rules. An English sonnet has 14 lines. Each line has 10 syllables. A syllable is a beat in the words when the line is spoken. The end line rhymes follow a specific pattern. AB, AB, CD, CD, EF, EF, GG. This makes a lot more sense after you read a few sonnets. But the important thing for now is to know that these rules make sonnets very difficult to write. However, Shakespeare is a master of the sonnet. Let's read Sonnet 60 and then study both the meaning of the poem as well as the structure of the sonnet. Like as the waves make towards the pebbled shore, so do our minutes hasten to their end, each changing place with that which goes before. In sequient toil all forwards do contend. Nativity, once in the main of light, crawls to maturity, wherewith being crowned, crooked ellipses 'gainst his glory fight, and time that gave doth now his gift confound. Time doth transfix the flourish set on youth, and delves the parallels in beauty's brow, feeds on the rarities of nature's truth, and nothing stands but for his scythe to mow. And yet, to times in hope, my verse shall stand, praising thy worth, despite his cruel hand. The first thing you will notice is that this is a very difficult poem to understand. The English language has changed a lot since the poem was written. Even for a native English speaker, this can be difficult to understand without slowing down and thinking about the words. Let's look first at the structure of the poem. The poem is divided into 3 quatrains and a couplet. Don't worry about learning those words. Just think of it as different sections of the poem. I've divided them by color so you can see the sections. The rhymes are within each section. So, in section 1, shore rhymes with before. Those are the A lines. The B lines are end and contend. The letters A and B do not have anything to do with the words. It might be easier to think of them as 1 and 2, but people who talk about poetry like letters rather than numbers. We can follow this structure through the rest of the sonnet until we reach the end. Then we reach something different. The last 2 lines rhyme with each other. The other aspect of sonnets is that for a sonnet to be a sonnet, it must have 10 syllables in each line. Now, you do not want to read the poem this way, but let me show you what I mean by looking at the first section. Like as the waves make toward the pebbled shore, so do our minutes hasten to their end, each changing place with that which goes before. In sequent toil all 4 words do contend. Again, not the way you want to read the poem, but necessary to think about if you want to write a poem that is a sonnet. I think that is enough talking about the structure of the sonnet. Let's begin focusing on the words and the meaning of this poem. Let's start with section 1. Like as the waves make towards the pebbled shore. So like as. That is an interesting beginning to the sentence, but he's making a comparison. So something is like the waves that come in towards shore. They are like the waves that come in one after another toward the beach, towards this shore. Pebbles are very small stones. So do our minutes hasten to their end. So now he's comparing waves with time, minute being the measure of time. Hasten, the word hasten means to move quickly. Each changing place with that which goes before. So this is similar to like if you'd set up a domino, one thing causing another thing. So a tick of a clock, you can imagine changing place. So this minute, one wave is replaced by another wave, and 1 minute is replaced by another wave. In sequent toil, so work in an order, all 4 words do contend. 4 words here is a motion, but he's using it to say all human activity, all the directions. This is the only way that things ever go. Now let's move on to the second section, or quatrain. Nativity, once in the main of light. Nativity is a reference to birth. So a young child, once in the main of light. The main of light would be when the sun is highest in the sky. So once this baby has been born and once it's reached the light of day, it crawls to maturity. Maturity means the full adulthood, when you are fully seen as an adult. Wherewith is a fancy word. We don't usually use the word wherewith. We kind of say where being crowned. So this is fully, has reached the peak of being, we put crowns on kings when they come of age. So crawls to maturity, wherewith being crowned. The apostrophe D there is just a shortening, but it could be crowned. We would say CROWNED, crowned. Crooked ellipses, 'gainst his glory fight. Let's look at that word right in the middle first, 'gainst. So what is that? That's a shortening of the word against. Again, we don't use words like that as much, but it's good for you to know that is just a shortening of the word against. Crooked ellipses, these are kind of bent lines. If you imagine an old man or an old woman, their back sometimes bend. They're not able to stand up straight. Crooked ellipses. And time gave life and health and energy. Now his gift confound. Takes back those things, takes back energy, takes back time, takes back life. Section 3. Time doth transfix the flourish set on youth. So time does, the word doth is an old way of saying does. Time does transfix the flourish set on youth. Time takes away the beauty, the flourish, the flower set on youth, on young people. And delves, goes into, creates the parallels in beauty's brow. You can imagine the deep lines and wrinkles on someone's brow, which is their forehead, the top part of their face. Makes those lines. Parallel means two lines that run the same direction but never touch. Again, feeds on the rarities. He's talking about how time feeds on the rarities of nature's truth. So eats away at the basics or the most beautiful things in nature. And nothing stands but for his scythe to mow. So we have this image, you may have even seen it before, of death with a black cloak and a large scythe. This is a mowing device, and death would come and use it on lives, just like it was supposed to be used as a farming tool to clear plants. And it was like a one-person lawn mower. And now we reach our final lines. And yet to times in hope my verse shall stand, praising thy worth despite his cruel hand. And you see this a lot in sonnets, where you have the quatrains which are moving us in one direction, kind of a sad direction about how time is going to slowly destroy everything. And then in a lot of different sonnets, the couplet at the end will switch and move the thought in a different direction. So what Shakespeare is saying is, yet to times in hope, my verse. So he's written this. The verse means this poem. My verse shall stand. So he's saying this poem, where all other things will fall away, this poem will endure, praising thy worth, praising the worth of whomever he wrote this poem for. A lot of times poems were written for specific people, for specific instances, often trying to tell a man or a woman how much they are loved and trying to be romantic. Praising thy worth despite his cruel hand, meaning even though time will come for us all, we're going to stand and there is hope. We have broken down this poem to try and understand it a little better. Do we understand it all? No. But that's fine. Let's put the pieces back together and read it again and see how much more we understand. Like as the waves make towards the pebbled shore, so do our minutes hasten to their end, each changing place with that which goes before. In sequient toil all forwards do contend. Nativity, once in the main of light, crawls to maturity, wherewith being crowned, crooked ellipses 'gainst his glory fight, and time that gave doth now his gift confound. Time doth transfix the flourish set on youth, and delves the parallels in beauty's brow, feeds on the rarities of nature's truth, and nothing stands but for his scythe to mow. And yet, to times in hope, my verse shall stand, praising thy worth, despite his cruel hand. Okay, let's read it now with just the pictures and see if you can hear the words and understand without reading along. Like as the waves make towards the pebbled shore, so do our minutes hasten to their end, each changing place with that which goes before. In sequient toil all forwards do contend. Nativity, once in the main of light, crawls to maturity, wherewith being crowned, crooked ellipses 'gainst his glory fight, and time that gave doth now his gift confound. Time doth transfix the flourish set on youth, and delves the parallels in beauty's brow, feeds on the rarities of nature's truth, and nothing stands but for his scythe to mow. And yet, to times in hope, my verse shall stand, praising thy worth, despite his cruel hand. Thank you for joining me for Learning English with Poetry. Make sure to subscribe and share this channel with other people who might enjoy it. I really appreciate your help. And never stop learning.